An American soldier finds a beautiful Japanese POW hanging on a tree with a sign, "America, don't forgive." In the steamy jungles of the Pacific, with bombs falling and bullets flying, this weary sergeant makes a decision that will change everything. She's barely breathing, marked for death by her own people for showing mercy to American prisoners. But as he cuts her down and hides her in an abandoned mission, the real battle has only begun. What starts as a rescue becomes something deeper when a half-American, half-Japanese boy enters the picture, clutching nothing but his father's baseball glove and desperate hope. The military is hunting them. The jungle holds danger at every turn, and a terrible storm is brewing both in the sky and in the sergeant's own heart. What happens when duty to country collides with the whispers of conscience? When enemies become something more than just faces across a battlefield? And in a world torn apart by war, can mercy survive when everything else is falling apart? The jungle air stuck to Sergeant Caleb Whitmore's skin like a wet blanket. His boots sank into the soft earth as he walked the edge of an abandoned village. The rising sun barely broke through the thick trees, leaving the world in half shadow. Birds that should have been singing stayed quiet. The smell of smoke hung in the air from yesterday's fighting. Caleb wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. His uniform felt heavy and damp against his tired body. The weight of his rifle pulled on his shoulder. He'd been on patrol since before sunrise, and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. "Just a little farther," he mumbled to himself, "then back to camp." The war in the Pacific had stretched on too long. Each day blurred into the next, patrolling, fighting, sleeping, then doing it all over again. Caleb had stopped counting the days. All he knew was that home was an ocean away, and Kansas seemed more like a dream than a real place. Something caught his eye, a flutter of cloth through the trees. Caleb froze, his hand tightening on his rifle. He listened, but heard only the soft rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. "Hello?" he called, then immediately regretted it. If it was enemy soldiers, he'd just given away his position. No answer came. Caleb moved forward slowly, careful where he placed each step. The cloth moved again, not like someone walking, but like something hanging. His heart beat faster as he approached. Then he saw her. A young Japanese woman hung from a thick branch, her wrists bound tightly with rope. Her feet barely touched the ground beneath her. Her head hung forward, dark hair falling across her face. Around her neck, a rough wooden sign with crude letters, "America, don't forgive." Caleb's stomach turned. He'd seen death before, too much of it. But this was different. This was cruel. He rushed forward, expecting to find a corpse. But as he reached up to cut her down, he saw her chest rise slightly. "My God," he whispered. "You're alive." He pulled out his knife and carefully cut through the ropes. She collapsed into his arms, surprisingly light. Red marks circled her neck and wrists. She had been left to die slowly. Not a quick hanging, but a drawn-out torture. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment. Dark brown eyes full of fear, then closed again. Caleb looked around frantically. He couldn't take her back to camp. His commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, had made it clear that all Japanese civilians were to be treated as potential enemies. But he couldn't leave her to die either. "Hold on," he said softly, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "I'm going to help you." He remembered an old mission building not far from there, abandoned when the fighting started. He'd passed it on patrol a week ago. It would have shelter, maybe even clean water. Caleb adjusted the woman in his arms and began walking quickly through the trees. Every sound made him jump, the crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves. if anyone saw him carrying an enemy. The mission appeared ahead, its white walls stained with mold and weather. The wooden cross that once topped it had fallen to the side. Caleb pushed open the heavy door with his shoulder and stepped inside. Broken pews lined the dusty floor. Sunlight streamed through holes in the roof. It wasn't much, but it was safer than the jungle. He laid the woman gently on a pew in the back corner, where shadows would hide her. Night would fall soon, and he needed to get back to camp before they sent someone looking for him. "I'll come back," he promised, knowing she probably couldn't understand him. "With water, food. Just hold on." Her breathing came shallow but steady. Would she live until morning? Caleb didn't know. But for the first time in months, he found himself praying, really praying, as he slipped back into the growing darkness. Dawn painted the sky pink as Caleb snuck away from camp. He'd filled his canteen with fresh water and stuffed his pockets with field rations, crackers, dried meat, a chocolate bar. Not much, but better than nothing. The mission looked different in the early light, less like a sanctuary and more like what it was, a broken building in the middle of nowhere. Caleb pushed open the door, half expecting to find the woman gone, or worse, dead. But she was sitting up, her back against the wall. Her eyes, wide and alert now, watched him enter. Caleb raised his empty hand to show he meant no harm. "I brought water," he said slowly, holding out the canteen. She didn't move at first. Then, carefully, she reached for the canteen. Her fingers trembled as she brought it to her lips and drank deeply. "Thank you," she said in accented but clear English. Caleb couldn't hide his surprise. "You speak English?" She nodded slowly, lowering the canteen. "I was nurse, American hospital, before war." Caleb sat on a pew across from her, giving her space. "I'm Sergeant Caleb Whitmore, United States Army." "Aiko," she said softly. "Aiko Sato." "What happened to you, Aiko? Who did that to you?" Pain crossed her face as her hand moved to the rope burns on her neck. "Japanese officers. They say I help American prisoners. Give extra food, medicine." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They right. I did." Caleb pulled out the rations from his pocket and offered them to her. She took them with another quiet, "Thank you." "Please," she said between small bites of the crackers. "Do not tell your soldiers. They will not believe. They will think I spy." Caleb knew she was right. The war had poisoned everything with suspicion. Americans saw all Japanese as enemies. Japanese saw all Americans as devils. The truth got lost somewhere in the middle. "I won't tell," he promised, though he wasn't sure why. His duty was clear: report enemy personnel, especially those accused of helping prisoners. But something deeper than duty moved him now. He remembered his wife, Sarah, reading from their family Bible on Sunday mornings back in Kansas. "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." She had died 2 years before the war. Pneumonia took her one harsh winter. But her voice still came to him sometimes, clear as day. "I have to get back," Caleb said, standing. "But I'll return tonight. Try to rest." Aiko nodded, already looking stronger after the water and food. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why you help me?" Caleb paused at the door. "I don't rightly know," he admitted. "Just seemed like the right thing to do." That evening, as Caleb walked toward the chow line, Private Jenkins fell in step beside him. "Whitmore," he said, nodding. "Hear you were out on patrol yesterday? See anything interesting?" Caleb kept his face blank. "Just jungle. Lots of jungle." "No sign of that Jap woman the captain's looking for?" Caleb's heart skipped. "What woman?" "Some nurse they caught helping our boys at a POW camp. She escaped before they could finish her off. Captain says shoot on sight. Jenkins shrugged. Extra rations for whoever finds her. Caleb forced himself to shrug back. Didn't see anyone. Just trees and more trees. After dinner, Caleb waited until the camp grew quiet. Most men were writing letters home or playing cards. He slipped away, saying he needed a smoke alone. The path to the mission seemed longer in the dark. Every shadow might be a patrol. Every sound might be someone following him. But he made it, pushing open the door to find Aiko sitting exactly where he'd left her. A soldier approached the chapel while Caleb was inside. He barely had time to hide Aiko behind the tattered altar curtains before the door creaked open. Whitmore? That you? It was Corporal Davis, the company chaplain's assistant. Yeah, Caleb said, trying to sound casual. Just needed some quiet to pray. Davis nodded. Know what you mean. Gets noisy in camp. Mind if I join you? Caleb's mouth went dry. Actually, I was just finishing up, pretty tired. Sure thing. Davis seemed disappointed. Captain's got us on high alert, looking for some Jap spy. You hear about that? Bits and pieces, Caleb said, moving toward the door. See you at breakfast? After Davis left, Caleb waited a full 5 minutes before helping Aiko out from her hiding spot. She was shaking. They looking for me? She whispered. They will kill you too if they find you help me. Nobody's killing anybody, Caleb said firmly. You'll be safe here. I promise. He didn't know how he'd keep that promise, but he meant it all the same. Caleb stood guard outside while Aiko rested inside the chapel. Through the broken windows, he heard her soft voice singing what sounded like a hymn in Japanese. The melody was familiar somehow, though the words were foreign. Inside, torn between his duty as a soldier and the stirring of his conscience, Caleb listened and watched the stars come out one by one. Morning inspection came too early. Captain Reynolds, a hard man with cold eyes, paced in front of the assembled soldiers. Intelligence reports a female Japanese spy in the area, he announced. Possibly wounded. She escaped execution after being caught aiding enemy prisoners. He looked at each man in turn. Orders are shoot on sight. No questions, no mercy. She's already killed 2 of our men. Caleb kept his face still, but his stomach twisted. He knew the last part was a lie. Aiko wasn't strong enough to kill anyone, and she'd been helping prisoners, not harming them. Sergeant Whitmore, Reynolds said suddenly. You were on patrol yesterday. See anything suspicious? All eyes turned to him. Caleb swallowed hard. No, sir. Nothing but jungle. Reynolds studied him for a moment, then moved on. Double patrols today. I want that spy found. After inspection, Caleb tried to go about his normal duties. He cleaned his rifle, helped unload supplies, ate lunch with the other men. But his mind kept returning to the mission and to Aiko. Was she still safe? Did she have enough water? As soon as darkness fell, he made his way back to her. This time, he brought more food, a small first aid kit, and a spare blanket. You came back, Aiko said, relief in her voice. Told you I would, didn't I? Caleb spread the blanket on a pew for her. How are you feeling? Better. She touched the fading marks on her neck. Why you saved me? I am enemy to you. Caleb sat down heavily. I couldn't just watch someone hang for showing mercy. That's not what I'm fighting for. Aiko's eyes filled with tears. I only wanted to help. The prisoners, they were starving, sick. Guards beat them. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I am nurse. I cannot watch suffering and do nothing. I understand, Caleb said softly, and he did. In that moment, the war and its sides seemed very far away. Once, Aiko continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I hide little boy. Half American, half Japanese. His father American soldier, mother Japanese woman from farm. When war start, Japanese soldiers want to kill him, say he traitor blood. Her hands twisted in her lap. I could not let them. Not a child. Caleb felt something shift inside him. The neat lines between friend and enemy, right and wrong, blurred before his eyes. What happened to him? He asked. He hide now, in cave by shore. I bring food when I can. She looked up at Caleb, her dark eyes pleading. He just little boy, not understand war. Caleb nodded, understanding all too well. War didn't care who it destroyed. Soldiers, nurses, children. It consumed everyone in its path. Get some rest, he told her. I'll come back tomorrow. He left the chapel under the light of the moon, praying for clarity. The right path had never seemed so unclear. From the shadows of nearby trees, Private Hobbs watched Caleb's departure with narrowed eyes. He'd been following the sergeant for days, certain he was hiding something. Now he knew. 2 days passed. Caleb visited Aiko each night, bringing what supplies he could without raising suspicion. She grew stronger, the color returning to her face. But rumors spread through the camp. Someone was stealing medical supplies. Bandages, quinine for malaria, sulfa powder for infections. Small amounts, but enough to notice. Caleb confronted Aiko about it during his next visit. Have you been taking supplies from our camp? Aiko lowered her eyes. Not from camp, from aid drops. She hesitated. Villagers still here, children sick with fever. I help them when I can. That's dangerous, Caleb said, though he couldn't bring himself to be truly angry. If someone catches you, who will help them if I don't? She interrupted. War not their fault. Before Caleb could answer, Aiko suddenly swayed on her feet. He caught her before she fell, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. You're burning up, he said, alarmed. Just tired, she mumbled, but Caleb knew better. She'd been giving medicine to others while fighting her own fever. He laid her on the blanket and spent the night cooling her forehead with water from his canteen. As she drifted in and out of consciousness, he found himself reciting psalms under his breath, prayers he hadn't said since Sarah died. The Lord is my shepherd, he whispered. I shall not want. By morning, Aiko's fever had broken. Her breathing came easier, though sleep still held her. Caleb watched the dawn light filter through cracks in the mission roof, casting golden stripes across her face. She was going to live, he decided, and he would make sure of it. Within days, stories of a ghost woman spread through nearby villages. People spoke of a healer who came at night, treating the sick, disappearing before sunrise. Some said she was a spirit. Others said she was an angel. Caleb knew better. Despite his warnings, Aiko slipped out at night to tend to the villagers. In return, they left food outside the mission. Rice wrapped in leaves, fresh fruit, once even a chicken. When a mother brought her sick child directly to the mission door, Caleb nearly sent her away. But Aiko insisted on helping. The boy has malaria, she explained, feeling his hot forehead. Need quinine, please. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. He watched as Aiko mixed medicine with water, speaking softly to the frightened child in his own language. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. That evening, the chaplain himself visited the mission unexpectedly. Caleb barely had time to warn Aiko, who hid in a small storeroom. Sergeant Whitmore, the chaplain said, surprised. I didn't expect to find anyone here. Just seeking some quiet, sir, Caleb replied, for reflection. The chaplain nodded thoughtfully. Many men turn to faith in war. Finding comfort? Caleb thought about the woman hiding just feet away, about the lies he'd told, about the way the world had turned upside down. I'm struggling with questions of forgiveness, sir, and what God expects of us in war. Heavy questions, son? The chaplain sat on a dusty pew. War makes enemies of people who might otherwise be friends. I think God understands that better than we do. After the chaplain left, Aiko emerged from hiding. Her hands trembled from the strain of keeping silent. He seems kind, man, she said. He is, Caleb agreed. But even kind men follow orders in war. Looking at her shaking hands, Caleb realized something that shook him to his core. This woman was risking her life daily, not just for her own people, but for anyone who needed help, even her enemies. While he carried a gun, she carried medicine. Which of them, he wondered, was truly fighting for a better world? The 5th day of hiding, Aiko brought a confession that changed everything. Caleb? She said his name softly as evening shadows filled the mission. I must tell you something. The boy I spoke of, Kenji, he is still in danger. Caleb looked up from the small fire he'd built in an old metal bucket. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. The half-American child? Aiko nodded, her eyes reflecting the flickering light. He hides in cave near coast. Japanese forces moving that way soon. Her voice broke slightly. He only 7 years old. No one to care for him but me. Caleb felt the weight of her words. One person hiding was dangerous enough. Adding a child meant twice the risk, twice the food needed, twice the chance of discovery. How far? He asked finally. Half-day's journey. I promised his mother before she died. Aiko's fingers twisted in her lap. I understand if you cannot help. Already you risk too much. The fire crackled in the silence between them. Caleb thought of his own childhood in Kansas, running through wheat fields, his father's strong hand on his shoulder, his mother's songs in the evening. What would it be like to be 7 years old, hiding in a cave, waiting for someone who might never return? We'll leave at dawn, he said, his decision made. I can borrow a jeep. Say I'm checking supply. Rotes. Relief and gratitude washed over Aiko's face. She bowed her head. Thank you, she whispered. God see your heart, Sergeant Whitmore. Caleb wasn't so sure about that. God hadn't seemed very present in the blood and mud of war. But looking at Aiko's hopeful face, he felt something stir inside him that had been dormant since Sarah died. A sense that maybe, just maybe, goodness could still exist in this broken world. The morning sky threatened rain as Caleb signed out a jeep from the motor pool. The sergeant in charge barely looked up from his clipboard. Supply run to the northern checkpoint, Caleb explained, the lie coming easier than he'd expected. Be back by sunset, came the bored reply. Storm coming. Caleb drove the dusty vehicle to the mission where Aiko waited, a small bundle of supplies clutched in her arms. She wore an old shirt and pants Caleb had brought her, clothes that had belonged to a soldier who wouldn't need them anymore. With her hair tied back and a cap pulled low, she might pass for a Filipino helper from a distance. Ready? He asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. She nodded, though fear showed clearly in her eyes. It was the first time she'd left the safety of the mission since Caleb had found her. The jeep bounced along overgrown jungle trails. Aiko directed him with small gestures, pointing left or right at forks in the path. They spoke little, the rumble of the engine and the threat of patrols keeping them alert and tense. Around midday, the trail led them closer to the coast. The jungle thinned, revealing glimpses of blue ocean beyond the trees. Caleb could smell salt in the air. There, Aiko pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. Cave behind those stones. Caleb parked the jeep in a thicket where vines and leaves would hide it from passing planes. They continued on foot, climbing over slippery rocks still wet from the morning dew. The cave entrance was small, just a dark crack in the stone face that Caleb might have missed if Aiko hadn't led him directly to it. She called out something in Japanese, her voice soft but urgent. No answer came. "Kenji," she called again, worry creeping into her tone. "Kenji-kun?" A shuffle came from inside, then a small face appeared in the shadows, a boy with straight black hair falling across his forehead and eyes that held both Asian and European features. He was thin, his clothes dirty and torn, but his eyes lit up when he saw Aiko. "Sato-san!" he cried, rushing forward to throw his arms around her waist. Aiko dropped to her knees, holding the child close, murmuring words of comfort in Japanese. Over his shoulder, her eyes met Caleb's, full of tears and relief. The boy spotted Caleb and froze, pressing closer to Aiko in fear. "It's okay," Aiko said in English, then repeated something in Japanese. "He friend, American friend." Caleb crouched down, trying to make himself less threatening. He noticed the boy clutched something in his small hand, an old, worn baseball glove, its leather cracked and faded. "Hello, Kenji," Caleb said gently. He pointed to the glove. "You like baseball?" The boy followed Caleb's gesture, then nodded slowly. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a chocolate bar, his last ration. He broke off a piece and offered it. "Hungry?" Kenji looked to Aiko, who nodded encouragingly. The boy took the chocolate, his eyes widening as he tasted it. "Thank you," he said in careful English. Thunder rolled in the distance as dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The storm the motor pool sergeant had mentioned was moving in faster than expected. "We should get back," Caleb said, eyeing the sky, "before the rain makes the trails too muddy for the jeep." They gathered Kenji's few possessions: a small blanket, a wooden toy soldier, a battered tin cup, and the precious baseball glove. The boy kept close to Aiko as they made their way back to the hidden vehicle. As they settled Kenji in the back seat, Caleb asked the question that had been on his mind. "The glove? Where did he get it?" Aiko's expression softened. "From his father, American sailor from place called California." She helped Kenji fasten his seatbelt. "They meet before war, live together on small farm. Then Pearl Harbor happened. American man sent home. Kenji's mother stay in Japan with family." "What happened to them?" Caleb asked, though he feared he knew the answer. "Mother died in bombing 2 months ago. Father?" She shrugged sadly. "No letters come anymore. Maybe prisoner. Maybe dead." As if understanding they were talking about him, Kenji hugged the old glove to his chest and said something to Aiko in Japanese. "He say his father teach him to catch ball." Aiko translated. "Say someday they play baseball together again." The hope in the boy's voice, despite everything he'd lost, hit Caleb like a physical blow. He turned away, pretending to check the Jeep's fuel gauge while he blinked back unexpected tears. "Let's go home," he said gruffly, starting the engine. Rain began to fall as they drove away from the coast, fat drops that quickly became a downpour. The jungle path turned to mud that splashed up the sides of the Jeep. Caleb drove carefully, aware of the precious cargo he carried. In the passenger seat, Aiko prayed silently, her lips moving without sound. In the back, Kenji fell asleep, lulled by the rhythm of the rain and the rocking of the Jeep, his first safe sleep in months. When they reached the mission, the rain had slowed to a gentle patter. Caleb helped carry Kenji inside, laying him on a makeshift bed of blankets near the altar. The boy didn't wake, his small body exhausted from months of fear and hiding. "He is too thin," Aiko said, brushing hair from the child's forehead. "Needs good food, milk." Caleb nodded, already wondering how he'd managed to get such things. I'll see what I can do. They sat in comfortable silence as night fell completely, listening to Kenji's even breathing and the dripping of rain from the mission roof. Why did you stay? Caleb asked suddenly. When the war started? You speak English? You could have left Japan. Aiko was quiet for a long moment. My people suffering too? She said finally. Need help. Need care. Nurse's duty not change because of war? She looked at him directly. Why you save me from tree? I am enemy. Caleb thought about it. Because it was wrong, he said simply. What they did to you was wrong, and I guess I wanted to do something right in all this wrongness. Aiko reached across the space between them and touched his hand lightly. You good man, Sergeant Whitmore, in heart where it matters. Her touch was warm, human. In that moment, Caleb realized how long it had been since he'd felt a gentle touch. War made men hard, made them forget the simple comfort of kindness. I lost my faith when my wife died, he admitted, surprised by his own words. Sarah got sick winter before Pearl Harbor. Pneumonia? Nothing I could do but watch her slip away. The old pain surfaced like a physical ache. Prayed every day, got no answer. Sometimes answer is not what we want, Aiko said softly. Sometimes answer is strength to continue. A rustling outside the mission door made them both freeze. Caleb reached for his sidearm, moving to stand between Aiko and the entrance. The door creaked open, revealing not soldiers but the mission's chaplain, his uniform soaked from the rain. I thought I'd find you here, Sergeant, he said, shaking water from his hat. You've been... His words stopped abruptly as he spotted Aiko and the sleeping child. For a terrible moment, no one moved. Then the chaplain slowly closed the door behind him. Looks like you've got some explaining to do, son, he said quietly. She was being executed, Caleb said, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Kenji. Just left there to die slowly. I couldn't walk away. The chaplain, Father Mike to the men in camp, sat on a pew across from them. His lined face showed not anger, but concern. You know what the captain's orders are, he said. Any Japanese civilians are to be detained and questioned. They'll kill her, Caleb insisted. And the boy, too, most likely. She's not a spy. She was helping American prisoners. That's why they tried to hang her. Father Mike looked at Aiko, who met his gaze steadily despite her fear. Is this true, miss? Aiko nodded. I nurse at hospital. When wars start, they make us treat Japanese soldiers only, but American prisoners brought to camp nearby. Many sick, dying, no medicine given to them. She swallowed hard. I take what I can. Bandages, quinine, food sometimes. Japanese officers find out. The chaplain was silent for a long time. Rain pattered on the roof, a steady rhythm in the tense quiet. The boy? He asked finally. Half American, Caleb explained. His father was a sailor from California. Mother died in an air raid. Father Mike ran a hand over his face. You've put yourself in a difficult position, Sergeant. Insubordination. Possibly desertion, if they look at it harshly. I know, sir. And you've put me in a difficult position as well. The chaplain stood up and walked to where Kenji slept. The boy's small chest rose and fell peacefully, one hand still clutching the baseball glove, even in sleep. Father Mike sighed deeply. My duty is to God first, the Army second. He turned back to them. I won't report this. Not yet, anyway. But, Sergeant, you need a better plan than hiding them in an abandoned mission. That's no life for a child. Relief washed through Caleb. Thank you, Father. Don't thank me yet. If Captain Reynolds finds out, we'll all face consequences. As the chaplain prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "The 23rd Psalm," he said. "That's what you were reciting the other night when I passed by. My favorite, too." After he left, Caleb positioned himself near the door, gun at his side. He wouldn't sleep tonight. Couldn't risk it with the danger so much closer now. Aiko sat beside Kenji, singing softly in Japanese. The melody was familiar, though the words were not. A lullaby, perhaps, or a folk song. "What's that you're singing?" Caleb asked. "Old song," she replied. "About cherry blossoms, how they fall too soon but return each spring." She smiled sadly. "My mother sing to me when I small?" Caleb thought of his own mother's songs. Amazing Grace on Sunday mornings. Red River Valley while hanging laundry. The memories felt like they belonged to someone else, to a life lived long ago. "Get some rest," he told Aiko. "I'll keep watch." Unknown to them, Private Hobbs had followed Caleb for days, suspicious of his frequent absences from camp. That night, he watched from the tree line as the chaplain left the mission. Through a broken window, he could see candlelight and movement inside. Caleb, the Japanese woman, and now a child. Hobbs smiled coldly in the darkness. This was the leverage he needed. The next morning brought brief sunshine after the storm. Caleb returned to camp to avoid suspicion, promising to come back by evening. Aiko and Kenji remained hidden in the mission, the boy still too frightened to be left alone. As Caleb cleaned his rifle outside the barracks, a shadow fell across him. He looked up to find Private Hobbs standing there, a smirk on his thin face. "Morning, Sergeant," Hobbs said, his voice low. "Nice day after all that rain." Caleb nodded cautiously. Hobbs had never sought him out before. "Something I can help you with, Private?" Hobbs glanced around to make sure no one was in earshot. "Actually, I think maybe we can help each other." He leaned closer. "Saw something interesting last night, near that old church." Caleb's hands stilled on his rifle. "That so?" "Pretty Japanese gal, little half-breed kid." Hobbs's smile widened. "Even saw the chaplain paying a visit. Very interesting." Ice formed in Caleb's stomach. "What do you want, Hobbs?" "Just what's fair." The private straightened up. "Half your back pay for the next 3 months. That's my silence." "That's blackmail," Caleb said through gritted teeth. Hobbs shrugged. "Call it what you want. I call it insurance, for both our sakes." His eyes hardened. "You're harboring a spy, Sergeant? That's a hanging offense. If not for you, then certainly for her." Caleb's fingers itched to grab his gun, to point it at Hobbs's sneering face. But violence wouldn't solve this problem. It would only create more. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Sure thing, Sarge. Take all the time you need." Hobbs started to walk away, then turned back. "Till tomorrow. Then I go straight to Captain Reynolds." As Hobbs sauntered off, Caleb fought the urge to be sick. He'd known the risk when he cut Aiko down from that tree. Now the consequences were catching up to him. That evening, he told Aiko everything. "We need to move you," he said, pacing the mission floor. "Both of you, somewhere safer." "Where?" Aiko asked, her face pale with worry. Beside her, Kenji played with his wooden soldier, oblivious to the danger. Caleb thought of the map in his pack. "There's another mission, near the coast, in territory held by Filipino guerrillas, friendly to Americans. If we can get you there..." "How far?" 3 days on foot, maybe 2 if we push hard." Aiko looked at Kenji. "He cannot walk so far. 2 weeks still." "I'll carry him if I have to," Caleb said firmly. That night, they prepared for their journey. Caleb gathered what supplies he could without raising suspicion. water purification tablets, a compass, bandages, matches. Aiko packed the few food items villagers had left for her. They would have to find more along the way. As Caleb built a small fire to cook their last meal at the mission, Aiko taught Kenji how to fold paper into cranes. The boy's small fingers worked carefully, his face intent on the task. "My mother say fold 1,000 paper cranes brings good luck," Aiko explained to Caleb. "Long life, happiness." Caleb watched them work together, the firelight warming their faces. In another world, another time, they might have been any family spending an evening together. The thought caught him by surprise, not because it seemed impossible, but because it felt right. "When war is over," Kenji said suddenly in his careful English, looking up at Caleb. "You teach me baseball?" The innocent question, so full of hope for a future that might never come, nearly broke Caleb's heart. He knelt beside the boy and gently touched the old glove that was never far from Kenji's side. "Sure thing, partner," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "First thing when the war's over. I promise." That night, as Aiko and Kenji slept, Caleb sat by the door with his pistol loaded, watching the moon rise over the jungle. Whatever happened tomorrow, he would protect them. Even if it meant desertion. Even if it meant never seeing Kansas again. Somewhere in the darkness, crickets sang their endless song. Caleb checked his gun again and whispered to himself, "Mercy isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing a man can show." He believed it now more than ever. Morning arrived with streaks of pink and gold. Caleb woke Aiko and Kenji while darkness still clung to the edges of the mission. They needed to leave before the camp stirred to life, before Hobbs could make good on his threat. "Remember," Caleb told them as they gathered their meager belongings. "Stay close. Move quietly. If I signal you to hide, do it quickly." Aiko nodded, securing a small pack to her back. Kenji clutched his baseball glove, eyes wide but trusting. Before departing, Caleb carefully burned their remaining supplies. Blankets too bulky to carry, scraps of food wrappers, anything that might prove someone had been living in the mission. The smoke rose like a prayer to the brightening sky. They slipped out just as the first birds began to sing. Caleb led them away from the camp, following a narrow animal trail that wound deeper into the jungle. The path would be slower but safer than the main roads where patrols might spot them. The morning air felt heavy, promising another hot day. Insects hummed around them as they walked single file through the dense foliage. Caleb kept his rifle ready, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. By mid-morning, Kenji began to lag. The boy tried to keep up, but his thin legs trembled with the effort. Without a word, Caleb lifted him onto his shoulders. Kenji's small hands gripped Caleb's hair for balance. "Okay up there?" Caleb asked, adjusting his stride to keep the boy secure. "Yes," Kenji replied softly. "I see far." Aiko smiled at the sight of them, the broad-shouldered American soldier carrying the half-Japanese child. It was a picture of hope amid the wreckage of war. They stopped at noon beside a small stream. While Aiko helped Kenji wash his face and hands in the cool water, Caleb studied his compass and map. "Making good time," he said, more to himself than to them. "Should reach the valley by sundown." "Then what?" Aiko asked, joining him. Caleb traced their route with his finger. "Cross the valley tomorrow. Third day, we reach the coastal mission." He pointed to a small cross marked on the map. "Father Mike says there's a Filipino doctor there. Helps refugees. You'll be safe until—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish. Until what? Until the war ended? Until America or Japan surrendered? Those days seemed impossibly far off. "Until peace comes," Aiko finished for him, Caleb nodded, grateful for her understanding. Yes, until peace comes. They continued their journey as the sun climbed higher. The jungle thickened, forcing them to move more slowly, pushing through tangled vines and ducking under low branches. Kenji walked when he could, but Caleb carried him more often than not. Toward late afternoon, they crested a small rise and got their first view of the valley below. A patchwork of abandoned rice paddies and small villages scattered along a winding river. Some buildings still stood intact. Others were just charred frames against the green landscape. Beautiful, Aiko whispered, despite the signs of war. Caleb had to agree. The setting sun turned the valley golden, the river a silver ribbon cutting through it. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine peace returning to this place. Farmers working their fields again, children playing along the riverbanks. They made camp on the hillside, using fallen branches and broad leaves to create a simple shelter. Caleb managed to catch 2 small fish in the nearby stream. Aiko cooked them over a tiny, nearly smokeless fire, adding wild berries she had gathered along the way. As night fell, Kenji fell asleep quickly, curled up with his precious glove. Aiko and Caleb sat side by side at the edge of their camp, looking out over the darkening valley. Back home, Caleb said quietly, I have land. Not much, but good soil. My father's farm. Been in the family 3 generations. You miss it, Aiko said. It wasn't a question. Every day. Caleb pulled a worn photograph from his shirt pocket. A small white farmhouse with a porch swing, fields stretching behind it. My sister looks after it while I'm gone. Writes me every month about the crops, the weather. Aiko studied the photo carefully. Peaceful place. It is. Caleb tucked the picture away. What about you? What was your home like? Aiko's eyes grew distant with memory. Small house in Kyoto, garden with cherry trees. My father was teacher before war. Mother played koto, string instrument. Her voice softened. They both gone now, first bombing. They sat in silence, the weight of all they'd lost hanging between them. If we survive, Aiko said finally, what happens after war? It was the question Caleb had been avoiding. In saving her, in helping Kenji, he had crossed a line. He wasn't just a soldier following orders anymore. Whatever happened after the war, nothing would be simple. I don't know, he admitted. But we'll figure it out, one day at a time. Aiko's hand found his in the darkness, a touch of comfort and connection that needed no words. Dawn brought a heavy mist that clung to the valley, shrouding the villages and rice paddies in white. It would provide good cover, Caleb thought as they broke camp, but would also make it harder to spot potential dangers. They descended into the valley slowly, picking their way down the hillside. The ground became softer underfoot, the jungle giving way to farmland long abandoned. People live here still? Kenji asked, looking at the empty fields. Some, Caleb replied. But many left when the fighting started, hiding in the hills or moved to bigger towns. They walked along the edge of a rice paddy, water reflecting the cloudy sky. Birds waded in the shallows, untroubled by human concerns. Around midday, they approached a small village, just a cluster of bamboo huts with thatched roofs. Smoke rose from one chimney, but otherwise, the place seemed deserted. Caleb signaled for Aiko and Kenji to wait in the cover of a banana grove while he scouted ahead. The village lane was empty, the dirt packed hard from years of footsteps. Most doors stood open, homes abandoned in haste. A sound made him turn, a soft moan coming from one of the huts. Caleb approached cautiously, rifle ready. Inside, an elderly Filipino man lay on a simple bamboo mat. Blood soaked through a crude bandage on his leg. His eyes fluttered open at Caleb's entrance. American, the man whispered, relief washing over his face. Thank God. What happened here? Caleb asked, kneeling beside him. Japanese patrol, the man replied weakly. Yesterday, looking for guerrillas. Shot those who wouldn't leave? He grimaced in pain. My family fled to the mountains. I too slow. Caleb hesitated only a moment before calling. Aiko, I need you here. She appeared in the doorway seconds later, Kenji close behind her. At the sight of the wounded man, she immediately knelt beside him, examining the injury with practiced hands. Bullet still inside, she said grimly. Need to remove or infection will kill him. The old man's eyes widened at the sight of Aiko, fear replacing relief. Japanese? She's a nurse, Caleb assured him. She can help you. The man looked between them, confusion clear on his weathered face. Japanese helping American? American with Japanese? We're just people, Caleb said firmly. War doesn't change that. After a moment's hesitation, the man nodded weakly. Please, help. Aiko sent Kenji to gather clean water while she prepared what few medical supplies they carried. Need fire? She told Caleb. To sterilize knife, and whiskey if any. Caleb found a bottle of Filipino rice wine in a nearby hut and started a small cooking fire. While Aiko worked, he kept watch outside, alert for any sign of the patrol that had attacked the village. The procedure was difficult. The man bit down on a leather strap, while Aiko carefully extracted the bullet with Caleb's knife, cleaned the wound with wine, and stitched it with thread from her own clothing. Throughout it all, her hands remained steady, her focus unwavering. When it was done, the old man slept, exhaustion and relief carrying him into a healing sleep. Will he live? Caleb asked as Aiko washed blood from her hands. If infection stays away, yes. She looked tired but satisfied. Good man, strong. They decided to stay the night, unwilling to leave the wounded man alone. Kenji helped gather food from the abandoned gardens, yams, bananas, a few tomatoes still clinging to their vines. That evening, as they ate a simple meal, the old man woke. His name was Miguel, and he had lived in the village his entire life. My grandson fights with guerrillas, he told them proudly, against Japanese. Soon, Americans win war. Everything good again. Caleb and Aiko exchanged glances but said nothing. The reality of war was never so simple, the ending never so certain. Before they slept, Miguel asked for water. As Aiko helped him drink, he studied her face. You Japanese, but you help me, he said wonderingly. Why? Aiko smiled gently. Pain same in any language. Healing too. In the morning, Miguel's fever had broken. Color returned to his face as he ate the porridge Aiko prepared. My family will return soon, he assured them. Now you go. Be safe. Before leaving, Aiko changed his bandage one last time and left him with clean water and what food they could spare. In return, he gave them a small carving of a water buffalo, a village good luck charm. For safe journey, he said, pressing it into Kenji's small hand. As they continued through the valley, Caleb felt a strange sense of peace. In the midst of a war that divided the world into enemies and allies, they had found something simpler and truer, the common ground of human compassion. The second day's journey proved more difficult. The morning's clear skies gave way to heavy clouds, and by noon, rain began to fall. Not the brief tropical shower they'd experienced before, but a steady, soaking downpour that turned the ground to mud and reduced visibility to a few yards. They sought shelter beneath a rocky overhang, watching water stream off the edge like a curtain. Kenji shivered despite the warm air, his clothes plastered to his thin frame. Can't stay here, Caleb said, after an hour had passed with no sign of the rain letting up. We need to cross the river before dark. The river that cut through the valley was normally shallow enough to wade across, according to Father Mike. But after hours of heavy rain, it would be rising quickly. They pressed on, heads bent against the downpour. Mud sucked at their boots with each step. Twice, Kenji slipped and fell. The second time, Caleb simply lifted him onto his back, where the boy clung like a wet monkey. When they reached the river, Caleb's heart sank. What should have been an easy crossing had become a churning brown torrent. Too dangerous, Aiko said, raising her voice over the rush of water. Caleb studied the river carefully, searching for options. About 50 yards downstream, fallen trees created a natural bridge, risky but possible. There, he pointed. We can cross on those logs. They made their way carefully along the riverbank. The tree bridge looked more precarious up close. 3 massive trunks tangled together, spanning the width of the river but sitting at awkward angles. I'll go first, Caleb said, setting Kenji down. Test it. Then you follow with Kenji. The first log was slick with rain and moss. Caleb moved slowly, arms outstretched for balance. The roar of the river below seemed to grow louder with each step. Halfway across, the log shifted slightly. Not enough to dislodge it, but enough to send a jolt of fear through him. He froze, waiting for it to settle, then continued more carefully. When he reached the far bank, he turned and waved for Aiko and Kenji to follow. Aiko knelt in front of the boy, saying something Caleb couldn't hear over the water. Then she took Kenji's hand, and they started across. They were nearly halfway when it happened. A large branch, carried by the current, slammed into the log bridge. The impact shook the entire structure. Kenji lost his footing and slipped, a small cry escaping him as he fell toward the rushing water. Aiko reacted instantly, grabbing his arm with one hand while clinging to the log with the other. For a terrible moment, they hung suspended, Kenji dangling over the torrent. Caleb was already moving, scrambling back onto the log bridge. He reached them just as Aiko's grip on the slippery wood began to fail. "Hold on!" he shouted, seizing Kenji's other arm. Together, they pulled the terrified boy back onto the log. They inched forward, Kenji between them now, 4 hands keeping him secure. When they finally reached the bank, all 3 collapsed onto solid ground, gasping and shaking. "You okay, partner?" Caleb asked, checking Kenji for injuries. The boy nodded, his eyes wide with lingering fear. Then, unexpectedly, he threw his arms around Caleb's neck in a fierce hug. "You saved me," he whispered. "We both did," Caleb said, meeting Aiko's eyes over the boy's shoulder. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding deeper than words. Whatever happened, wherever the war took them, they were bound together now by something stronger than national loyalties or military orders. They made camp early that night, all of them exhausted from the river crossing. The rain finally stopped as sunset painted the clouds in brilliant orange and purple. They found shelter in an abandoned rice storage hut, its walls keeping out the evening chill. Caleb built a small fire outside to dry their clothes. As darkness fell, Kenji fell asleep quickly, his baseball glove tucked under his head like a pillow. Aiko sat beside Caleb at the fire, her face thoughtful in the flickering light. "You have letter," she said suddenly. "In pocket, from home. You not read for many days." Caleb was surprised she had noticed. The letter from his sister had arrived just before he found Aiko. In the chaos that followed, he'd nearly forgotten it. "Been a little busy," he said with a slight smile. "Read now," she encouraged. "News from family important." Caleb pulled out the crumpled envelope. The paper was soft from being carried so long. He opened it carefully and unfolded his sister's familiar handwriting. Dear Caleb, he read aloud softly. I hope this finds you well, or as well as anyone can be in war. The farm is doing fine. Spring planting finished on time despite the shortage of help. Your dog Rusty misses you something terrible. Sleeps on your bed every night no matter how many times I chase him off. Caleb paused, smiling at the thought of the old hound making himself comfortable. I have sad news, he continued, his voice growing more somber. Dad passed last month. His heart gave out while fixing the barn roof. Doc said it was quick, that he didn't suffer. Caleb's voice caught. He'd known his father was getting older, his health not what it once was. But he'd always imagined returning home to him, sitting on the porch together, telling stories of the war that his father, who'd fought in the Great War, would understand. I'm sorry, Iko said softly, touching his arm. Caleb nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then he continued reading. He was proud of you, Caleb. Told everyone his son was fighting for freedom. I buried him next to Mom and Sarah in the churchyard. Planted those blue flowers you like on the grave. I have to ask, brother, have you found any peace out there? I worry about you carrying all that grief for Sarah alone. She wouldn't want that for you. Neither would Dad. Come home when you can. The farm is waiting. So am I. Love, Eleanor. Caleb folded the letter carefully. His father was gone. The news settled into him slowly, like a stone sinking in deep water. Peace, he said after a long silence. She asks if I've found peace. Iko waited, giving him space for his thoughts. I used to think peace was something you found, he continued, staring into the flames. Like it was out there waiting, if only you looked in the right place. He shook his head. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe peace isn't found. Maybe it's made, choice by choice, day by day. Wise words, Iko said. In Japan, we say peace like garden, must tend every day or weeds grow. Caleb thought of the farm waiting for him in Kansas, of his sister tending it alone now, of his father's fresh grave with blue flowers. So much had changed in his absence. And he had changed too, in ways his family might never fully understand. What will you do? He asked Iko. After we reach the coastal mission, after the war. She looked toward the hut where Kenji slept. Protect him. Find place where half American, half Japanese boy can grow without hate. Her eyes reflected the firelight when she turned back to Caleb. What you do? Go home, he said automatically. Then, less certainly, try to farm again, try to live again. Iko's hand found his, warm and small, but surprisingly strong. Not alone, she said simply. Caleb turned their joined hands over, studying the contrast, his large, sun-darkened and calloused. Hers smaller, the hands of a healer. No, he agreed quietly. Not alone. Dawn broke clear and bright. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. They set out early, knowing the third day of their journey would bring them to the coastal mission and safety. The terrain began to change as they moved east. The valley gave way to rolling hills, the jungle thinning as they approached the coast. Salt tinged the air, and seabirds circled overhead. Kenji walked with renewed energy, pointing out colorful birds and interesting plants. The baseball glove remained tucked securely in his belt, but he seemed less afraid to let go of it, more confident that it would not be taken from him. By midday, they reached a high ridge. Below them stretched the blue expanse of the Pacific, sunlight dancing on its surface. A sandy beach curved along the shore, and there, set back among palms, stood a whitewashed building with a cross atop its roof, the coastal mission. We made it, Caleb said, relief washing through him. Aiko shaded her eyes against the bright sun. Many people there, she observed, pointing to figures moving around the mission grounds. Refugees, probably, Caleb replied. Father Mike said they take in anyone who needs help. They began their descent toward the beach, following a well-worn path down the hillside. For the first time in days, Caleb felt the tension in his shoulders ease. They had made it. Against all odds, they had crossed the valley safely. The sound of a truck engine shattered the peaceful moment. Caleb spun around to see a military vehicle bumping along the ridge road they had just left. An American Jeep. Quick, he urged, pushing Aiko and Kenji toward a stand of bamboo beside the path. Hide! They crouched among the thick stalks, watching as the Jeep stopped at the top of the ridge. 2 soldiers climbed out, surveying the view below. Caleb's blood ran cold as he recognized them, Captain Reynolds and Private Hobbs. He said they'd be heading this way, Hobbs was saying, pointing down toward the mission. Japanese woman, little half-breed kid, and Sergeant Whitmore. Reynolds lifted binoculars to his eyes, scanning the hillside methodically. If you're lying to me, Private? I'm not, sir. Saw them with my own eyes at that old church. The sergeant's been hiding them for weeks. Reynolds lowered the binoculars. And you waited until now to report it because... Hobbs shifted uncomfortably. Wanted to be sure, sir. Serious accusation and all. Reynolds didn't sound convinced. We'll check the mission. If they're there, Whitmore will face court-martial. The woman, too. Harboring a spy's a hanging offense. The men returned to their Jeep and continued along the ridge road, heading toward where it eventually descended to the mission. They'll reach the mission before us, Caleb said grimly. We need another plan. Aiko's face had gone pale. They will hurt Kenji? Caleb didn't want to frighten her, but he wouldn't lie. Reynolds follows orders, and his orders are to treat all Japanese as enemies. Kenji looked between them, sensing the danger even if he didn't understand all the words. What we do? He asked in his small voice. Caleb studied the coastline, searching for options. About a mile south of the mission, rocky cliffs rose from the water. If they could reach those without being seen. This way, he decided, leading them off the path and into the thicker foliage that lined the hill's base. We'll circle around and approach from the south. There might be caves in those cliffs where you can hide while I scout the mission. They moved as quickly as caution allowed, keeping to the cover of trees and brush. The sound of the Jeep faded as it followed the road toward the mission. The journey took longer than Caleb had hoped. Kenji tired quickly, and the coastal terrain was rocky and difficult. By the time they reached the cliffs, the sun had begun its descent toward the western horizon. There, Aiko pointed to a dark opening in the rock face, partially hidden by hanging vines. The cave was shallow but dry, offering good shelter and a view of the beach below. Most importantly, it couldn't be seen from above or from the direction of the mission. You'll be safe here, Caleb told them, setting down their meager supplies. I'll go check the mission, see if it's clear or if Reynolds is still there. Aiko caught his arm. Too dangerous. They looking for you too. I can't leave you two here indefinitely, Caleb said gently. We need help, and the mission is still our best chance. Kenji tugged at Caleb's hand. You come back? He asked, fear creeping into his voice. Caleb knelt to the boy's level, placing his hands on the small shoulders. I promise. I'll always come back for you. As he prepared to leave, Aiko pressed something into his palm, the small wooden water buffalo Miguel had given them. For luck, she said simply. Caleb tucked it into his shirt pocket, next to his sister's letter. Then, with a final glance at the two people who had somehow become his responsibility, his family, He set off toward the mission alone. The beach stretched before Caleb like a pale ribbon between jungle and sea. He kept to the tree line, moving cautiously. The mission's white walls glowed orange in the late afternoon light, still a quarter-mile ahead. Through the gathering shadows, he could make out figures moving around the mission grounds. Some wore the distinctive habits of Catholic sisters. Others appeared to be locals, Filipinos working or seeking shelter. Near the main building, an American jeep sat parked, confirming his fears. Reynolds was still there. Caleb crouched behind a fallen palm, considering his options. He could wait until dark, try to slip into the mission unnoticed. But that would mean leaving Aiko and Kenji alone in the cave for hours more. Or he could try to find a sympathetic face among the mission staff. Someone who might help without alerting the military. The decision was made for him when a figure in a white missionary collar emerged from the mission and walked toward the beach. Even at this distance, Caleb recognized the chaplain, Father Mike. He waited until the priest was far enough from the buildings, then slipped from the tree line. "Father?" he called softly. Father Mike turned, surprise crossing his weathered face. "Sergeant Whitmore, what in heaven's name—" "Please," Caleb cut him off, glancing anxiously toward the mission. "I need your help." The chaplain followed Caleb's gaze, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Captain Reynolds arrived this afternoon, looking for you and your friends. We crossed the valley, made it this far." Caleb ran a hand through his dirty hair. "But Hobbs betrayed us, told Reynolds everything." Father Mike's expression grew grim. "The captain's ordered a search of the mission grounds, claims he's looking for a spy." "She's not a spy," Caleb said fiercely. "She's a nurse who helped American POWs. That's why her own people tried to hang her." The chaplain sighed heavily. "I believe you, son. But Reynolds follows orders, not conscience." He looked out over the darkening ocean. "Where are they now?" "Cave in the cliffs south of here. Safe for the moment, but we can't stay there." Father Mike thought for a long moment. "There's a supply boat due tomorrow morning. Takes medical goods to the Allied Field Hospital on the next island." He lowered his voice further. "I know the captain. Good man. Might be willing to take on extra cargo." Hope flickered in Caleb's chest. "You think he'd help?" "For the right reason." The chaplain nodded. "But you'll need to get them to the dock before dawn, and stay hidden until then." "What about Reynolds?" "Leave him to me. I'll make sure his search keeps him busy elsewhere." Father Mike glanced back toward the mission. "Meet me at the small dock behind the mission at 500. Boat's called the Mercy Light." Caleb gripped the chaplain's hand. "Thank you, Father." "Don't thank me yet," Father Mike said soberly. "And Sergeant, pray for clear weather. Storms brewing offshore." As if to confirm his words, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the water. Night fell completely as Caleb made his way back to the cave. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain, and lightning flickered on the horizon. He worried about the approaching storm, not just for their safety in the cave, but for the supply boat's arrival. If seas turned too rough, it might not come at all. The cave mouth looked like a deeper patch of darkness among the rocks. Caleb whistled softly, a signal they'd arranged before he left, and heard Kenji's answering whistle from within. Inside, Aiko had created a small sleeping area with palm leaves. Kenji sat beside her, his baseball glove open on his lap, as she told him a story. "American soldiers there?" she asked as Caleb settled beside them. "Yes, but I found Father Mike." He explained the plan quickly. "We leave before dawn, head to the dock behind the mission. Boat will take us to the Allied hospital on the next island." "And then?" Aiko's question hung in the air. Caleb didn't have an answer. The future beyond tomorrow's boat ride seemed impossible to imagine. One step at a time, he reminded himself. That was all they could manage now. "We'll figure it out," he said finally. "Together." They shared the last of their food, some dried fruit and a few crackers Caleb had saved. Outside, the wind picked up, bringing with it the first spatters of rain. "Storm coming?" Iko observed, glancing toward the cave opening. "We'll be on that boat before the worst hits," Caleb assured her, though he was far from certain. Weather in the Pacific could turn violent with little warning. Kenji had grown quiet, his small face serious in the dim light. "American soldiers want to hurt Sato-san?" he asked suddenly, his English careful but clear. Caleb looked to Iko, unsure how to answer. The boy had seen too much of war's cruelty already. "Some people only see enemies," she explained gently. "Not people. But Caleb-san sees with better eyes." Kenji seemed to consider this, then nodded, as if it made perfect sense. "Like my father," he said. "He say people same everywhere. Just want home, family." The simple wisdom from the mouth of a 7-year-old struck Caleb deeply. How many men had died because they couldn't see that basic truth? "Your father sounds like a smart man," Caleb said, his throat tight with emotion. "The smartest," Kenji agreed proudly. He opened his baseball glove wider, revealing something tucked inside, a faded photograph. "See?" The picture showed a laughing American sailor with his arm around a pretty Japanese woman. Between them stood a younger Kenji, maybe 5 years old, grinning at the camera. They looked happy, ordinary, a family like any other. "That's in California," Kenji explained. "Before war." Caleb studied the sailor's face, open, friendly. Someone who might have fought alongside him in another reality. Someone who probably now sat in a POW camp if he'd been unlucky enough to be in Japan when Pearl Harbor happened. Or worse. "You'll find him again," Caleb said, though he knew such promises were dangerous. "When the war's over." Kenji carefully returned the photo to his glove. "Sato-san say same thing." He yawned widely, his eyelids growing heavy. "Sleep now," Iko told him, settling the boy on the palm leaf bed. "Long walk tomorrow." They sat in comfortable silence as Kenji drifted to sleep. The rain fell harder outside, drumming against the rocks. Occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the cave in stark white before plunging it back into darkness. "Your plan good?" Iko asked quietly. "Best we've got," Caleb admitted. "Father Mike will help us, and the boat captain." Why they risk for strangers? It was a fair question. Why would anyone risk their safety for people they'd never met, especially people labeled as enemies? "Same reason I cut you down from that tree, I reckon," Caleb said after considering. "There's a point where being human has to matter more than being on the right side." Iko nodded slowly. "Like Good Samaritan story." Caleb raised his eyebrows, surprised. "You know the Bible?" "Mission school in Kyoto, before war." A small smile touched her lips. "Learn English from American missionaries. They read Bible stories." They talked long into the night, sharing pieces of their lives before the war had torn the world apart. Caleb spoke of his farm in Kansas, of wheat fields stretching to the horizon, of Sarah's laughter in the kitchen. Aiko told of cherry blossom festivals in her hometown, of her father's quiet wisdom, of her dream to someday run a hospital for children. "After war," she said softly. "Everything different, but some things same." She looked at Kenji's sleeping form. "Children need care. Wounds need healing. And people need each other," Caleb added. Their eyes met in the darkness, an understanding passing between them that went beyond words. Whatever tomorrow brought, they faced it together. Caleb woke with a start. The storm had intensified overnight, rain lashing the rocks outside their shelter. By his watch, it was just past 4 a.m. They needed to move soon to reach the dock by 5. He gently shook Aiko awake. "Time to go," he whispered. She nodded, immediately alert, and helped Kenji into his still damp shoes. The boy rubbed sleep from his eyes but asked no questions. He had learned to move quickly when told. They gathered their few belongings. Caleb checked his pistol. 6 rounds left. He hoped they wouldn't be needed. "Stay close," he instructed as they stepped out into the rain. "Follow the shoreline. Keep to the trees when we get closer to the mission." The wind drove the rain almost horizontally, stinging their faces. Waves crashed against the rocks below, sending spray high into the air. Kenji stumbled on the slick stones, and Caleb lifted him onto his back without breaking stride. "Hold tight, partner," he called over the howl of the wind. They moved as quickly as caution allowed, following the curving shoreline toward the mission. The darkness worked in their favor, hiding them from any watchful eyes. But it also made the journey treacherous, the path barely visible in the storm. As they neared the mission, Caleb led them deeper into the tree line. Through gaps in the foliage, he could see lights burning in the mission windows despite the early hour. The storm had probably kept everyone awake. The dock appeared ahead, a simple wooden structure extending into a small, sheltered cove. At its end, a single lantern swayed in the wind. Father Mike stood beneath it, rain pelting his slicker, peering anxiously into the darkness. No sign of the boat yet. Caleb motioned for Aiko and Kenji to wait in the trees. "Stay here until I signal it's safe." He approached the dock cautiously, keeping low. "Father," he called softly when he was close enough. The chaplain turned, relief washing over his face. "Sergeant, thank God, was afraid you wouldn't make it in this weather." "The boat?" Father Mike's expression grew troubled. "Captain radioed, running late because of the storm. Should be here within the hour." He glanced at the churning sea. "Assuming the storm doesn't worsen." Caleb looked back toward the trees where Aiko and Kenji waited. An hour was a long time to be exposed, with Reynolds and his men so close. "We'll wait in those trees," he decided. "Safer than standing in the open." The chaplain nodded. "I'll signal when I spot the boat." He hesitated, then added, "Reynolds has men watching the main dock. Not here yet, but they could check this one too." "What did you tell him about us?" "That I hadn't seen you." "Not a lie. I hadn't when he asked." Father Mike's weathered face creased with concern. "Be careful, son. Hobbs has him convinced the woman is some kind of master spy." "She's just a nurse trying to survive," Caleb said bitterly. "I know that, and God knows it. But war has a way of blinding men to truth." They were interrupted by a new sound cutting through the storm, the rumble of a Jeep engine. Headlights swept through the trees as a vehicle moved along the mission's perimeter road. "Go," Father Mike urged. "I'll stall them if they come this way." Caleb melted back into the tree line, rejoining Aiko and Kenji. "Boat's delayed," he whispered. "And Reynolds' men are patrolling. We need better cover." He led them deeper into the jungle that bordered the mission, finding shelter beneath a massive banyan tree. Its tangled roots and thick canopy offered some protection from both the rain and searching eyes. Kenji huddled against Aiko, shivering despite the warm air. She wrapped her arms around him, murmuring soft words of comfort. Minutes stretched into a half hour. The storm showed no signs of abating. Twice, patrols passed nearby, forcing them to press themselves against the wet earth until the danger passed. "What if boat not come?" Aiko asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. Caleb had been wondering the same thing. Their options were limited. They couldn't return to the cave. It was too far in this weather, and Reynolds' men might be watching the beach. They couldn't risk the mission itself, and they couldn't stay exposed in the jungle indefinitely. "It'll come," he said with more confidence than he felt. "Father Mike said the captain's a good man." Another set of headlights appeared, moving slowly along the perimeter road. This time, they stopped near the small dock. Doors slammed. Voices called out. Through the trees, Caleb could make out 3 figures: Reynolds himself, Hobbs, and another soldier he didn't recognize. They were talking to Father Mike, who stood his ground on the dock despite the captain's aggressive stance. "Stay here," Caleb whispered. "No matter what happens, don't move until you see that boat." "Where you going?" Aiko's eyes widened with alarm. "To help Father Mike." Caleb checked his pistol again. "Reynolds won't hurt a chaplain, but he might try to arrest him for aiding us." Before she could protest, he slipped away, moving silently through the underbrush. He couldn't hear their conversation over the storm, but Reynolds's angry gestures told him enough. The captain was losing patience. Caleb positioned himself at the edge of the trees, close enough to intervene if needed, still hidden from view. He wasn't sure what he'd do if Reynolds tried to arrest the chaplain. 6 bullets wouldn't get them very far against an entire company of soldiers. A new sound rose above the storm, the distinctive chug of a boat engine. A shape emerged from the rain-shrouded darkness, a small supply vessel, lights glowing softly as it approached the dock. The Mercy Light had arrived. Reynolds and his men turned toward the boat, momentarily distracted. Father Mike used the opportunity to glance toward the trees, giving a slight nod, their signal. Caleb hurried back to Aiko and Kenji. "Boat's here. We need to move fast, while Reynolds is distracted." He lifted Kenji onto his hip. "Stay low. Head straight for the dock. Don't stop for anything." They emerged from the shelter of the banyan tree into the full force of the storm. Rain blinded them as they half ran, half crouched toward the dock. The ground had turned to mud that sucked at their feet with each step. 30 yards. 20. The boat was securing its lines to the dock. Reynolds and his men stood with their backs to the jungle, arguing with the boat captain. 10 yards. Almost there. "Sergeant!" Father Mike called, spotting them. "Hurry!" Reynolds spun around, his hand going to his sidearm. "Whitmore, halt!" There was no time for halting. Caleb pushed Aiko ahead of him toward the dock. "Get to the boat!" he shouted above the wind. Reynolds drew his pistol. "Stop, or I'll shoot." Everything seemed to slow down. Caleb saw Hobbs smiling coldly through the rain, saw Father Mike step between Reynolds and them, saw the boat captain watching with wide eyes from his vessel. "Captain, please!" Father Mike's voice cut through the chaos. "These people need help, not handcuffs." "Step aside, chaplain," Reynolds ordered. "That woman is an enemy spy, and Whitmore is guilty of desertion and treason." "She's a nurse!" Caleb shouted back. "She saved American lives. Ask your prisoners when you get back to camp." Something flickered across Reynolds' face. Doubt, perhaps, or recognition that the situation had spiraled beyond simple orders. "The boy," Father Mike said more gently. "Look at the boy, Captain. Half American. His father is a U.S. sailor taken prisoner in Japan." Reynolds's gaze shifted to Kenji, who clung to Caleb with wide, frightened eyes. The baseball glove hung from the boy's belt, old leather dark with rain. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Hobbs lunged forward, grabbing for Aiko's arm. "Sir, we can't let them—" Caleb reacted without thinking. He set Kenji down and threw himself between Hobbs and Aiko. The two men collided, slipping in the mud, grappling for control. "Stop this!" Reynolds shouted, but his voice was lost in the storm. Hobbs was younger, faster, fueled by malice. He broke free of Caleb's grip and drew a knife from his boot. The blade flashed in a lightning strike as he lunged forward. Pain exploded across Caleb's side. He stumbled backward, feeling warm blood mix with cold rain on his shirt. Through blurring vision, he saw Reynolds grabbing Hobbs, forcing the knife from his hand. "Get aboard!" Father Mike was urging Aiko and Kenji toward the boat. "Now!" Aiko turned back, seeing Caleb wounded. "No, not without him!" The world tilted strangely. Caleb felt himself falling, then strong hands catching him, the boat captain and one of his crew. "Get him aboard," a gruff voice ordered. "Quick now!" He was being carried, laid on a hard deck. Rain fell on his face, then stopped as he was moved below. Voices argued above. Reynolds, Father Mike, the captain. "Military jurisdiction." "Humanitarian mission." "Answer to command yourself." Darkness crept at the edges of Caleb's vision. He fought to stay conscious, needing to know Aiko and Kenji were safe. A small hand found his. Kenji, tears mixing with raindrops on his face. "Caleb-san," the boy whispered. "Don't go." "Not going anywhere, partner," Caleb managed, though his voice sounded far away even to his own ears. "Promise." Aiko appeared beside them, her hands already working to examine his wound. "Not deep," she said, relief in her voice. "But need clean bandage." The boat's engine rumbled to life beneath them. Through the small porthole, Caleb could see the dock falling away. And Reynolds standing at its edge, watching them go, his face unreadable in the rain. "He let us leave," Caleb said wonderingly. Father Mike knelt beside him. Even the hardest heart can be softened by a child's fear. He squeezed Caleb's shoulder gently. "Rest now, son. You're safe. All of you." As the mission disappeared into the stormy darkness, Caleb felt a strange peace wash over him. They had made it. Against all odds, they had found their way to safety. Aiko worked quietly, cleaning his wound, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. Her hands were steady, sure, the hands of someone born to heal. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Caleb wanted to tell her that she had saved him as much as he had saved her. That in finding her, he had found a purpose beyond following orders. That in protecting Kenji, he had rediscovered the man he used to be, before grief and war had hardened him. But exhaustion pulled at him, dragging him toward sleep. The last thing he saw was Aiko's face, beautiful despite the dirt and fatigue, watching over him as the boat carried them to a new beginning. "Sergeant Whitmore, can you hear me?" Caleb opened his eyes to brightness. For a moment, he thought he was back in Kansas, sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. Then the unfamiliar ceiling came into focus, white paint peeling in places, a slow-turning fan creaking overhead. A face appeared above him, an older man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Welcome back, Sergeant. I'm Dr. Harrison. You're at the Allied Field Hospital on Samar Island." Memory returned in a rush. The boat, the storm, Hobbs' knife. "Aiko? Kenji? Are they—" "Safe and sound," the doctor assured him. "The woman has been quite helpful, actually. Turns out she's an excellent nurse. Been assisting with our overflow cases while you recuperated." Caleb tried to sit up, wincing at the pull of stitches in his side. "Careful now," Dr. Harrison cautioned. "That wound needs a few more days to heal properly." "How long have I been here?" 3 days. Fever had you in and out of consciousness the first night. Blood loss and exhaustion did the rest. The doctor checked Caleb's pulse. You're a lucky man. Half an inch deeper, and we'd be having a very different conversation. A small face appeared in the doorway. Kenji, his eyes lighting up when he saw Caleb awake. Caleb-san, he cried, rushing into the room. He stopped short of jumping onto the bed, remembering the wound. Hey, partner. Caleb smiled, warmth spreading through him at the sight of the boy. You been behaving yourself? Kenji nodded enthusiastically. I help Sato-san, bring bandages, hold things. He puffed out his chest with pride. Doctor, say I good helper. The best, Dr. Harrison agreed with a wink. Where is Aiko now? Caleb asked. Working in Ward C. I'll let her know you're awake. The doctor patted Kenji's shoulder. Why don't you stay and keep the sergeant company while I find her? After the doctor left, Kenji pulled a chair close to Caleb's bed. The baseball glove still hung from his belt, but it looked cleaner. Someone had oiled the leather. Father Mike fix it, Kenji explained, noticing Caleb's gaze. Say all good baseball gloves need care. Father Mike is here too? He visit yesterday. Bring chocolates. The boy's face grew serious. Mean soldier not come. Captain say you safe here. Relief washed through Caleb. Reynolds had kept his word, or perhaps he'd recognized that pursuing them further would bring more questions than answers. Seen any baseball here? Caleb asked, changing the subject to lighten the mood. Kenji's face brightened. Doctors play sometimes, after work. They say teach me when you better. I'd like that. Caleb could picture it, standing in sunshine, showing Kenji how to throw a curveball. Ordinary moments that war had made seem impossible. Footsteps approached, and Aiko appeared in the doorway. She wore a clean white nurse's uniform, her hair pulled back neatly. For a moment, Caleb didn't recognize her. Gone was the desperate woman he'd cut down from a tree, replaced by a confident medical professional. You awake, she said, her face breaking into a smile that took his breath away more effectively than any wound. Thanks to you, from what I hear. Caleb tried to straighten up, wincing again at the pull of stitches. Careful, she scolded gently, moving to check his bandage. Still healing. Her hands were cool against his skin as she examined the wound. Good, no infection. The doctor says you've been helping here. Aiko nodded. Many wounded, not enough nurses? A shadow crossed her face. War, same on all sides. Pain, blood, crying for mothers. Caleb understood. In the operating room, there were no enemies, only broken bodies that needed mending. What happens now? He asked quietly. To us? It was the question that had hung between them since the beginning. A question without an easy answer in a world divided by war. Aiko sat on the edge of his bed. Dr. Harrison send message to command. Tell them nurse with experience in Japanese prisoner treatment valuable for helping recovered American POWs. She looked down at her hands. They agree. Say I stay here as civilian assistant. And Kenji? Orphanage nearby take mixed-race children, but... She hesitated. Dr. Harrison and wife want foster him, until father found. She smiled at Kenji, who had moved to the window to watch planes landing at the nearby airstrip. They have no children, good people. Relief and something like joy filled Caleb's chest. They were safe. All of them. For the first time since finding Aiko hanging from that tree, he allowed himself to think beyond the next hour, the next day. What about you? Aiko asked. Army still want you? That was a more complicated question. Technically, he'd disobeyed orders, hidden an enemy civilian, possibly even deserted his post. Yet Reynolds had let them go. And Father Mike had promised to explain the circumstances to command. Don't know yet, Caleb admitted. Guess I'll find out when I'm back on my feet. They were interrupted by Dr. Harrison's return. He carried a large envelope. This just arrived for you, Sergeant. Classified military dispatch. Caleb took the envelope with trepidation. Perhaps this was his answer. Court-martial papers, dishonorable discharge, or worse. He broke the seal and pulled out several documents. As he read, his expression changed from concern to disbelief. What is it? Iko asked. Commendation, Caleb said numbly. For humanitarian action above and beyond the call of duty. He looked up at the doctor in confusion. And an honorable discharge on medical grounds, effective immediately. Dr. Harrison smiled knowingly. Seems your chaplain friend has connections in high places, and your Captain Reynolds had a change of heart after interviewing some recovered POWs, who confirmed Ms. Sato's actions helping American prisoners. Caleb shook his head, still processing. So I'm out? Just like that? Not just like that. You've served your country honorably for 3 years, Sergeant, and that wound will take months to heal completely. The doctor's eyes twinkled. Convenient timing, I'd say. War's winding down. Japan can't hold out much longer. The implications washed over Caleb slowly. He was free to go home to Kansas, free to rebuild the life that war had interrupted, free to choose his own path forward. His eyes found Iko's, reading the same recognition there. New possibilities stretched before them, uncertain, uncharted, but full of hope. You're sure about this? Father Mike asked, standing beside Caleb on the hospital's small veranda 2 weeks later. Below them, nurses and doctors moved between buildings. In a grassy area near the fence, Kenji played catch with Dr. Harrison, his face alight with concentration as he tried to master the throw. Never been more sure of anything, Caleb replied, his hand resting lightly on the bandage still wrapped around his midsection. The chaplain nodded thoughtfully. Your sister's expecting you home. And she'll see me, eventually. Caleb pulled out the letter he'd written the night before. I explained everything, about Iko, about Kenji, about staying to help until the war ends completely. And after that? Caleb watched as Iko emerged from one of the wards, medical charts tucked under her arm. Even at this distance, she seemed to sense his gaze, looking up to offer a small wave before continuing her rounds. After that, he said slowly, we have a farm in Kansas that needs tending. Plenty of room for a nurse to set up practice. And for a boy to learn proper baseball. Father Mike smiled. From enemies to family in the span of a month. God works in mysterious ways, Sergeant. He does at that, Caleb agreed. Though sometimes I think he just needs us to get out of our own way, to see people instead of sides. The chaplain clasped his shoulder warmly. I'll be heading back to the mainland tomorrow. Anything else you need? Caleb thought of the small velvet box tucked in his footlocker, a simple ring he'd purchased from a local craftsman, carved cherry wood instead of gold or diamonds. It would have to do until better times. Just your blessing, Father, and maybe a prayer that peace comes soon. Both freely given. Father Mike gazed out at the hospital grounds, where people of different nations worked side by side to heal the wounds of war. Though I'd say you've already found your peace, son. As the chaplain left to prepare for his journey, Caleb remained on the veranda, watching life unfold below. The pain in his side had dulled to a manageable ache. The memories of combat would take longer to fade, but each day brought new healing. He thought of the sign that had hung around Iko's neck that fateful day in the jungle. America, don't forgive. How wrong those words had proven to be. Forgiveness wasn't just possible. It was the only path forward from war's destruction. In the distance, Kenji caught a ball squarely in his glove, his joyful shout carrying across the yard. Iko paused in her work to applaud the achievement, her smile visible even from afar. Caleb touched the small wooden water buffalo in his pocket, their good luck charm from a journey that had changed everything. Then he headed down the steps, toward his family, toward a future none of them could have imagined a month ago. Behind him, cherry trees planted by island natives swayed in the ocean breeze, their first blossoms beginning to open under the Pacific sun. Fragile pink promises of renewal after the longest storm. Years later, in a small Kansas town, a cherry tree blooms outside a white church. Its branches sway in the spring breeze, petals drifting like pink snow across the grass. Beneath it stands a weathered bench. Each Sunday after services, an older man sits there, sometimes alone, sometimes with visitors who come to hear his story. Caleb Whitmore's hair has turned gray now. The wound in his side still aches when rain is coming, but his eyes remain clear and bright as he tells younger generations about a woman hanging from a tree, about mercy that outweighed duty, about finding family in the midst of war. Inside the church, Aiko teaches Sunday school, her English now perfect, though she keeps her accent as a reminder of where she came from. The children adore her stories of Japan, of cherry blossoms and paper cranes, of courage in dark times. And on the town's baseball field, a young coach named Kenji Whitmore shows local boys how to throw the perfect curveball. His father's old glove, carefully preserved and oiled, never far from reach. In the Whitmore farmhouse, on the mantel above the fireplace, sits a small wooden water buffalo. Beside it, a simple frame holds a faded sign with crude lettering. America Don't Forgive. Caleb keeps it there, not as a reminder of hatred, but as evidence of how wrong such words can be when tested against the human heart. For in that heart, in all hearts, lies the capacity to see beyond flags and uniforms to the person beneath. To recognize that peace isn't found, but made, choice by choice, day by day. To understand that forgiveness, freely given, can transform enemies into family. And to know that mercy, once shown, ripples outward like blossoms caught in a spring breeze, touching lives for generations to come.